In this video we want to talk about entrepreneurship and look at the forces that bring products into the market. There are four factors of production: land, labour, capital and entrepreneurship. All of them are important, but it's the entrepreneur who brings the product into existence. Without the entrepreneur we would not have new products. So all processed products have to be created. They don't just exist. Companies don't just make products, they have to be brought into existence. Someone has to think about the problem that the customers have in solving something and devise a product to meet that need. So the products have to be imagined by someone who then puts them on the market, gets them made, puts them on the market. These are the entrepreneurs. In return, they're paid a profit. In fact, entrepreneurs may be motivated by many factors, not just profits. They may be motivated by self-esteem, by the challenge of doing the task, the challenge of coming up with a product and solving a need. So the entrepreneurs are the ones who make the products that we use. Now in this video I'm just going to run lightly across entrepreneurship. The concept of entrepreneurship and the nature of entrepreneurship will be explored more fully in other videos. But just want to give a feeling for what entrepreneurship's about in this particular video. So it's not going to go too deeply into any of those areas. Let's start by talking about the entrepreneur. And let's take one famous entrepreneur and just focus on, it's a him, so let's focus on him for a few moments. You'll recognize this picture hopefully as Bill Gates. It was Bill Gates who set up Microsoft. It's Bill Gates who in a sense has changed the world. Bill Gates is one of the most famous entrepreneurs probably that has ever lived. Now Bill Gates must have had imagination. There must have been a period in his life when he did not think about computers, did not think about software, did not think about operating systems. Bill Gates may have other interests. He may have been interested in football or swimming, or we know he was interested in law. But what he had was imagination, and he became more and more intrigued with solving a problem. And when the problem was solved, then the problem was viable commercially. And that goes on to become Microsoft as we know it today. But this all started in Bill Gates' head. So it was his imagination that brought about these products. And without his imagination, well, perhaps someone else would have done it, but otherwise perhaps we would not be living in the world we're living in today. So his imagination gave him a business idea. It gave him a product, an idea for a product, an idea to do something, in this case do something with computers and get the computers to do certain things which would help us in our work lives, in our home lives, in our social lives and so on. So Bill Gates came up with an idea, a business idea, which was based on something he had imagined. And we assigned that to him. That was this basic idea of using computers in a certain way which would solve particular requirements or particular needs. And this of course gave us Microsoft Windows. And Microsoft Windows only exists because Bill Gates was able to assess the profitability of the product, to see if it would be commercially viable, if he could make an operating system and then sell it at a profit. Because if you sell it at a loss, the business will not exist. It must be sold at a profit in order to maintain the business. But having assessed the profits, we know that Bill Gates went on to change the world, because after a while we all became dependent upon computers, computer technology, and this is the way the world has evolved. He, by the way, became the richest person in the world. So from imagination, just imagination, no tools, no equipment, just imagination, just him thinking about a problem, he was able to become the richest person in the world. Unsuccessful entrepreneurs lose money and they go out of business altogether. So we think of entrepreneurs, generally speaking, as being very successful, but of course that's not true. It's not universally true. Many entrepreneurs come into existence because they have an idea. The idea works for a while and perhaps then fails, and the entrepreneurs go out of business. Entrepreneurs make new products in order to beat their competitors and to satisfy consumers. And by doing this, they hope to get rich. They hope to be successful. They may not be motivated by money. I've just put down hopefully to get rich there, but they may be motivated by esteem. They want to be looked up to. They want to be admired. They want to be praised. Or there might be something internal to them, just a sense of satisfaction that they have achieved something. They have seen a need, they have imagined a product, they've designed the product, they've produced it, brought it to market, and it was successful. And they get the reward out of thinking they've solved the problem. But some will do it for profits and will want to get rich. So there are different motivations, as we'll see later, for entrepreneurs. Now, without entrepreneurs, we know that we would live in a very boring world with no new products. We once lived in caves. We don't live in caves because people have had ideas. They've had imagination that inspired them to go on to make new products to improve our lives. So all the time, generation upon generation, we've made improvements. We lived in caves, we came out of the caves, and we eventually moved into dwellings, and now we've got the internet and electricity, and we have better knowledge of medicine, of education, social structure, and we have a lot of gadgets and machinery that makes our lives easier. And all of this happened because of entrepreneurs. So without the entrepreneurs, we would live in a very boring world. In fact, we'd still be living in the caves. Now, profit is important as a motivator, but as I said earlier, it's not the only motivator. Personal esteem, perhaps looking for recognition, a sense of achievement, all of those may be motivators as well. But profit is important. I keep coming back to it because in the business context we tend to emphasize the need for profits because profit is necessary for the business to exist. If the business is not making a profit, it doesn't exist. There's a young Bill Gates. Now you can imagine Bill Gates back then as someone who perhaps played football, had various interests, and was just perhaps an ordinary, everyday young person. But Bill Gates, like most people, grew, developed, matured. In a sense, Bill Gates evolved, and he evolved into Bill Gates, as we know Bill Gates today. So there was that personal growth, not just the physical change in Bill Gates, but the mental change, moving him from someone who had no idea perhaps about computers or about operating systems, in a sense, in inverted commas, the normal young person, to Bill Gates, the very sophisticated entrepreneur, the person who has, as I said, brought something into our lives which has changed our lives. And the same happens with business. Businesses can start small and they evolve into larger businesses perhaps through corporate growth. In fact, it's said about Bill Gates and Microsoft that they started in a garage. Whether that's completely true or not, I'm not sure. But they may have started in some small way and then moved into bigger premises as the business grew. So we see this type of evolution and development in a personal setting with Bill Gates here, and also with the corporate growth of the business growth, starting very small, moving into much larger organizations. So Bill Gates originally came up with DOS, the disk operating system. And if you look up at the top left hand corner, I've just put a picture of what we used to get on a computer screen, a lot of code, and the applications were not connected. They didn't have cut and paste. They had they ran a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet was the spreadsheet. You couldn't move data out of the spreadsheet into a word processor. You would run a word processor and it was completely self-contained. But that in itself was quite remarkable. So DOS was at the time seen as an amazing product. However, Bill Gates and his colleagues were all the time in the background working on something better, which was Windows 3.1. Windows gave the ability to cut and paste between applications. So now the word processor, the spreadsheet, the presentation package, all of these were somehow linked. You could cut information from one and paste it into the other. And this was a revolution. And there was also the development of the GUI, the graphical user interface. Using a mouse, we could click on the screen. With DOS, it was all done by keypad. We had to know certain key combinations to get things done. But with Windows, you could click on a mouse and the applications would open. But that was replaced by 95. So all the time, Bill Gates and his colleagues were working on developments. Even though we as customers would be very happy with Windows 3.1, they were working on Windows 95. Eventually they surpassed Windows 95 with Windows 98, which became Windows 2000. So all the time they're developing the product. They're not standing still. Windows Me, Windows XP, Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10. So we can see the evolution of the products that Microsoft made. Here I'm just focusing in here on the operating systems. Microsoft make a lot more products in terms of server software and many other products. But just looking at the operating systems that we're familiar with. And we can see all the time this person was constantly looking at the product, looking for ways to develop it, thinking about it, using his imagination to try to imagine what the product could do and what was technically possible, and trying to bring out a new version which was much better than the previous version, even though perhaps customers were not demanding a new version. It was evolving anyway. This is in parallel with what we see in nature and what we see in science. If we look at the way we all evolve, take Charles Darwin, for example, the Darwinian view of evolution. We started as very basic creatures, and eventually we became upright. We walked on our legs and were able to use our hands and developed the capacity to use tools. We evolved. We grew this way. And the same in economics. Alfred Marshall, who's the father of economics, in 1890 he gave us supply and demand and talked about the way in which markets work. And again, survival of the fittest, in the sense that the strong companies, the innovative companies, they're the ones who will survive. The weak companies with weak management and very few ideas, they will fail. So only the strong will survive within the marketplace. We can't always tell who's going to be strong from the early days, or just simply by looking in on the organization. For example, if we go back to Microsoft for a moment, there's the early team. You can see Bill Gates on the bottom left. Now, would you invest in these people? No, no disrespect to them, they're a super bunch of people, but would you invest your hard-earned cash in these people? Probably not. They don't look like they're going to become major entrepreneurs and major business people, and people who are going to go on to change, essentially change the world. But they don't look it. And I think, no disrespect to them, but that's the picture there. But in truth, these are the most talented people that we've probably, one of the groups of most talented people that the world has ever seen. I know there are others, Steve Jobs from Apple and many other people, but this lot are certainly one of the major groupings that has gone on to change the world. Now let's look at the imaginary cycle. We talked about the power of the imagination earlier. Let's take an entrepreneur. Well, this entrepreneur imagines a product. So it doesn't have to be an operating system for a computer. It could be part of a car, or part of a machine, or some item for the home, some product. This entrepreneur thinks they've got a product in mind. They need to estimate the market. They need to determine the size of the market. They also need to look at competitors, or potential competitors even. Perhaps not companies who are currently making similar products, but companies who could start to make similar products. So they need to assess who the competitors are likely to be. They've got to make some sort of estimate of profits to see if it's worthwhile doing it. And they've got to allow for risk, because there's always the chance of something going wrong, or customers turning against the product, or perhaps international competition. The product, or a similar product, arrives in from some other country. But having done all of that, they would have to organize the production, and then they would have to market the product. So to make the, so all of this happens before any revenue is received. So it's quite a risky business. Having said that, the entrepreneur has taken this into account and has got a certain propensity towards risk, which enables him or her to make this type of decision. Of course, if he or she is successful, they will perhaps get rich, and that might be the motivation. And if they're rich, they're happy. It could be that they're unsuccessful, that they have appraised the market in a certain way and got their calculations wrong, in which case they're unsuccessful and they will lose money, in which case they won't be very happy. Now, if they lose money, we don't feel sorry for them. If they make a lot of money, if they make a lot of profit and become rich, sometimes we're jealous of them. But the opportunity was there for us to do it. We didn't do it. So in a sense, we have no right to be jealous, because we could have done it. I could have set up the equivalent of Microsoft if I had the ability, if I had the imagination, which I don't have or didn't have. You could now start an organization which is bigger and more profitable than Facebook. Except you don't. It takes special people to do this. You might be a special person looking at a particular product, looking at a particular business in a particular area. So you are still an entrepreneur. You're just not the big entrepreneurs that we're focusing in on this occasion. Look at entrepreneurship in terms of price and quantity. Well, let's say here's a supply for a particular product and a demand. In this case, the entrepreneur has judged it correctly. There is a big demand for the product, so there's a high price and a high demand. So the entrepreneur is happy. They've judged the public's mood correctly. There is a high demand for this product. Therefore, they will be successful. It could be the demand is very low. When they've designed the product and gone through all the processes and produced it, they find that the market research was wrong and the customers were not that interested, in which case they'll be unsuccessful. They'll have a low price and a low demand. So we have the survival of the fittest. We have the best companies fitting in with this concept of the survival of the fittest. The best companies are the ones who survive, the ones who generate most revenue, the ones who can control their cost and have the most innovative product. The least successful will go out of business. Now, some definitions of entrepreneurship. Well, they make decisions under conditions of risk and uncertainty. Well, uncertainty is unknowable in the sense that we don't know the future. It's uncertain. We have no probability as to what's going to happen. We have no indication of what's going to happen. It's uncertain. With risk, we have some sort of probability associated with the outcomes. We're 50% sure this will happen, we're 20% sure it will happen, or we have some sort of probability. With uncertainty, we have simply no idea. So entrepreneurs are making decisions which will take a lot of effort, time, and perhaps resources, and they have no clear indication as to whether they're going to be successful or not. So they do engage in risk and uncertainty. Bill Gates, in developing Microsoft, committed a lot of time and energy to the development of the project. And perhaps if it had failed, he would have lost all of that time and effort and resource. Entrepreneurs are creative and have flexible imaginations. They're very creative people. They're making something out of nothing almost. They're coming up with an idea that everyone else has missed. Everyone else has not thought about. It's original, it's different, it's creative. And it's very flexible. They can adjust the idea and tweak it, modify it, until it precisely matches customer requirements. They are what one writer said, they are alert to business opportunities. Whereas most people are not alert to business opportunities. Most people take the business world as it is. We understand what products are being made. We're happy to buy the products that are put in front of us. But the entrepreneurs want to make the products. They want to tweak the products. They want to generate new products and change the way we think as consumers. Now, there are words associated with entrepreneurs that we will bump into. For example, we think of entrepreneurs as leaders. It could be debated. Perhaps entrepreneurs are leaders, or perhaps they're not. Perhaps they're just quiet people who want to develop an idea and then push the idea later when it's developed. But they don't see themselves necessarily as leaders. Perhaps that's more managerial. We'll talk about the difference between management and entrepreneurship later. Innovation is also mentioned in the context of entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about that in a while as well. Invention. They invent something. They come up with a new process, a new way of doing something, a new piece of equipment. They invent something. They certainly are motivated. They're very interested in what they're doing. And they're looking to change situations. They're looking to change the way we live, looking to change the way work is conducted. They are entrepreneurial in the sense that they want to make changes to the world. So these words we tend to associate with the entrepreneur. Now, the entrepreneur, as I said, is flexible and dynamic. Dynamic, constantly changing, constantly moving on, looking to new things, looking for new ways of doing things. And flexible, constantly modifying existing products and looking for ways to improve the product. Very similar to what I said with Bill Gates earlier and the different operating systems put forward by Microsoft. Each of the operating systems were good. It was just the people at Microsoft wanted to improve them. So they were looking to make changes all the time. They are agents of change. They do bring about change. Without the entrepreneurs, we would still be living, as I said earlier, probably in caves. It's the entrepreneurs who change our lives, that give us new products, new ways of thinking, new ways of living. So they're the ones who bring change into business, into industry, into commerce, into education, into our personal lives, into the home lives. They are alert and forward-looking. They're always looking to what the world is going to be like. They can imagine a world with their product in it. They can imagine how the product is going to be used. They can imagine the benefits of having the product. And that's what really pushes them along to enable them to carry out the changes to make the product that they have in mind. And they undertake risky investments. Investments that other people perhaps would not take on board. Some people may think it's a waste of time, spending a lot of time developing a product which may or may not work. Well, the entrepreneurs don't see it that way. They're interested. So they undertake the project. Even though there is a risk, it may fail. It's still worth doing. They're still interested. If it's successful, of course, they're very, very happy. Now, the entrepreneur, well, let's start with looking at the entrepreneur and the manager. Well, let's start with the manager. Managers tend to be governed by rules. Managers work in organizations. The organization has a rule book, a particular way of acting, performing. Certain tasks need to be completed. It needs to be completed at a certain time. The manager is good at working to rules. So the manager is not being creative. The manager is different, therefore, to the entrepreneur. The manager is governed and constrained by the rules. The manager is trying to complete the process. It's looking at the processes that need to be undertaken and trying to complete those on time and to good quality. It's essential work. It must be done. It takes a good manager to do it. But the managers are not entrepreneurial. They are working according to the constraints of the activity they're engaged in. Managers tend to be professional, and they have a career in mind. They like to have a salary. They like to have promotion. They're professional. They go about their work in a professional manner. All desirable attributes for the business when the business is established. But the product or the service they're working with is the product of entrepreneurship. It's the entrepreneur who has developed the product. Having developed the product, it's in a sense handed over to the manager to make the product, deliver the product, and ensure that the business is run efficiently, cost effectively, and professionally. So the manager is different to the entrepreneur. Now the question is, well, can a company be entrepreneurial? Well, the answer is entrepreneurs are creative. Therefore, people are creative, not companies. So, companies are not entrepreneurial. Companies may promote entrepreneurial thinking. Sometimes we think of companies, say, like Apple, who come up with a lot of products that people desire. And we think of Apple as an entrepreneurial company. In fact, it's the people within Apple who are entrepreneurial. Apple facilitates that type of thinking. It tolerates entrepreneurs. It enables them to have the environment in which they can be creative. But Apple itself is a company. And in a sense, as a company, it's a legal entity. So it can't be entrepreneurial. It's the people within the company that are entrepreneurial. So companies cannot be entrepreneurial. Bill Gates is creative. Microsoft is not creative. Microsoft is a company. It may not be just Bill Gates. It may be a whole team of people within Microsoft. And it's more likely the case that it's a whole team of people. Some of them with big ideas, some of them with little ideas. But all of them contributing towards the products, all of them having meetings and talking about ways in which they can bring their ideas to bear on the product. They are the creative ones. They are the entrepreneurs, not Microsoft. But Microsoft can facilitate them. Microsoft can perhaps take on the risk associated with their thinking. It can enable them to have the opportunity to think of ideas and put the ideas into practice. So in that sense, we think of Microsoft or Apple as entrepreneurial. But really it's the people within the organizations that are the true entrepreneurs. Can a group of people be entrepreneurial? Well, the entrepreneur is creative, and therefore it's an individual who's creative, not the group. So groups can't be entrepreneurial. It's people who are individuals who are entrepreneurial. The groups may facilitate entrepreneurial thinking. They may chat as a team and brainstorm some ideas and think about new ideas and spark each other off. But it's the people within the team who are entrepreneurial, not the team or the group itself. So the groups may meet to refine the idea, but the idea itself is individualistic. And therefore groups or teams cannot be entrepreneurial. Now, a group of workers may decide to market a new product, but the original idea for the product usually comes from the imagination of one of them. One of them usually comes up with the idea. Now let's look at the entrepreneur in the macroeconomy. The macroeconomy, the overall economy. Well, first of all, entrepreneurship leads to investment. When entrepreneurship occurs, people have a good idea for a product. They need to persuade the banks or persuade investors to enable the production to take place, enable the product to be produced. So they're trying to encourage investment. So investment expenditure will increase as a consequence of effective entrepreneurship. So investment expenditure would increase. This of course will lead to economic growth. If there's more investment in the country, there'll be more economic growth. The country will grow more. There's more industry, more commerce, more trading going on in the country as a consequence. And this will generate new products, which will boost the retail sector, will boost sales, maybe more employment, less people unemployed, less government expenditure on welfare. So generally a very positive thing to happen. There's also investment expenditure for replacement products. Go back to the example of the operating systems with Microsoft again and Bill Gates. The DOS system, DOS, the disk operating system, was very good, but it was replaced by Windows. And then each version of Windows was replaced by different versions. And it's going on to this very day. Windows 10, Microsoft has said, is the last version of Windows, but they're constantly updating it. There's new functionality coming into Windows 10 all the time, and they're fixing bugs and increasing its functionality. So there's replacement products. And replacement products really is the idea of innovation. They're innovating the product. They're changing the products. The products are in existence, but they are, in a sense, mutating. They're being altered to more effectively meet customer requirements. We call this sometimes this idea of creative destruction. Creative destruction means the product that's in existence is perfectly good. It's just been destroyed because a better product has been made. The product has been innovated. A better version has come into existence. This idea of creative destruction is based around the work of Joseph Schumpeter, a great economist from the mid-1900s. If you look at, say, DOS, as I said earlier, Microsoft, it was replaced by Windows, replaced by a different version of Windows, a more advanced version, and so on, right up to the present time when we've got whatever it is, Windows 10. So this is the process of creative destruction. Each one of these was good. It was just improved upon. And when it was improved upon, the old version went off the market. Nobody wanted it. They wanted the better version. So Windows 3.1 was replaced by Windows 95. Windows 95 was much better than Windows 3.1, so it was knocked out. With entrepreneurial strategic interface, well, we can see large corporations and small to medium-sized enterprises. The same applies to both. We have entrepreneurs in both areas. Generally speaking, we associate entrepreneurship with SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, because I suppose that's where entrepreneurs will start, and then the SMEs will become bigger and bigger and eventually become very large companies. But they start, generally speaking, quite small. Generally speaking, we don't get entrepreneurs coming into the market with very large organizations set up especially to produce their imagined or innovative product. So the entrepreneurs can exist within large corporations as well. Large corporations come up with new ideas. So they may have people within the organization who are good at generating ideas about product development and product change. And these would be entrepreneurs, but they're entrepreneurs who are within the large organization. We could have entrepreneurs working within SMEs or entrepreneurs who set up the SMEs. And this is what we call creation. Strategic management is monitoring the performance of the organizations. So strategic management is different to entrepreneurship. It's monitoring the performance of the organizations. Entrepreneurship is coming up with the ideas for the products and the services that the organizations should produce. Now, there is a differentiation of discovery, invention and innovation. Well, discovery is finding some relationship, perhaps a relationship in terms of the chemistry of products or the physics associated with certain processes, or it's generating an idea. It's discovering that something can be used in a particular way. And This is sometimes associated with this idea of serendipities, by chance or by luck. And there are many products that have come into existence because something happened by accident, and the entrepreneur witnessed it and thought about it and then went on to develop the product. Microwave ovens, LED bulbs. But there are many, many, many products that have come into existence by almost accident, and then the entrepreneurs have discovered that this is a useful development and they went on to commercially develop it. There's also invention. Sometimes people set out to invent something, new. They think about, wouldn't it be good if a certain product existed? Well, the product doesn't exist, so they've got to invent it. And that's creativity, that's invention. Sometimes also people look at existing products and they try to convert the product into something else. They look at the product, they think about it, they change certain aspects of the product, certain attributes of the product, and modify it, and it's innovation. It's looking at an existing product and developing something from it. It may not actually use any part of the original product. The original product might just inspire something new. And of course, at the end, they must protect what they've got. At the end, it's a new idea and the entrepreneurs protect it. Take, for example, someone who comes up with an idea of a radio that has no battery. It's just a wind-up radio. Now, on the face of it, this sounds utterly ridiculous. Now we know that it does exist. But if you just think about it, if someone goes to the bank to raise a loan to set up a business to make a radio that has no battery, a wind-up radio, it doesn't sound like a very good idea. It doesn't sound like a very commercial idea. But it does exist. It has been made. And then, when we think about it, there was an enormous market. Many parts of Africa do not have electricity pylons and electricity supply, but the people want to get the news or the weather, or they want to get entertainment, or they want to have some sort of contact. A wind-up radio, what a brilliant idea. Not just Africa, many parts of the world. And the technology can then be developed into developing light, wind-up torches, wind-up lights. So the idea is not just for a radio, it could be for many different situations. And what a brilliant idea for a situation where there is no electricity, and if you're using a radio with a battery and the battery wears out or runs out, you can't just pop into the shop and buy a new one. You might be miles from anywhere. A wind-up radio, that's a really good idea. And that was the brainchild of Trevor Bayliss. Turns out, an excellent idea. An absolutely wonderful product that has a lot of meaning in certain parts of the world, and a lot of utility in certain parts of the world. So entrepreneurial motivation, we talked about it at the start. We said it was linked to profits, and we'll stick with that. People do set up businesses in the hope to generate profits and get rich, but they also set up businesses for other reasons, and different people will be motivated in different ways. Some people might want to have esteem. They might want recognition and praise and be admired for what they've done. They want to have a strong reputation, and they want to be famous. Some want the challenge of making the product. It's complicated, perhaps, the product, and they want a challenge in being able to do it. And they want to feel the satisfaction when they've done it, when they've made the product, to feel happy that they did it. But they also want to have the freedom. They don't want to work in an office. They don't want to be a manager. They don't want to be constrained. They want to have the freedom of being able to develop and work freely. And out of all of this, we get the product. So, there are some sources that looked at throughout this, but that's all we're going to deal with in this video. It's been quite a long video. Don't suggest you look ahead all at once. Perhaps go back over it a couple of times. A lot of ideas in here about entrepreneurship, but it's just a very basic video at the same time, one introducing some concepts related to entrepreneurship. As I said at the start, these will be developed in much more detail in other videos on the course. But that's all we're going to deal with here, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.